Hello, humans! Welcome to the Illegal Trans Woman. I am thrilled to be talking to you. If you are seeing me online on Facebook, you are going to see me not in the station. You're seeing me right at the moment in the basement of my best friend in the world's house. He lives in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. I am on the midst of my Good Hearts road trip. I have reached mile 3,600 of what will be expected to be a 4,700 mile road trip. And I thought I would do this show on the road because last week you got a repeat. This week I want to give you at least some fresh. So I'm going to talk with you about my show here in the big story. But then we've got a wonderful guest, Emily Jackson-Edney, who is a pioneer, a transgender woman who literally worked to change the laws in Idaho and who is literally now fighting through legal process the current bathroom bill in Idaho. You're gonna really enjoy that interview, and of course, we always have my news bites and random acts. But let's get to what's going on with me with this big trip. I had 3 goals on this trip, which I'm calling the Good Hearts road trip because I talk about good hearts with my workshop, Gray Area Thinking. I teach about a tool set on how to be welcoming and inclusive to people who are considered different or other. And so I had 3 goals. One was to see parts of America that I've never, ever been to. The second was to connect with some friends. And the third was to do my mission work of spreading compassion and understanding. And specifically, I wanted to go to Idaho to do that. And I'm happy to report that I have accomplished all 3 of those goals, even with 1,100 miles yet to go. First, the amazing beauty of America. I cannot adequately explain to you in words how stunning our country is. To drive from Victoria, Minnesota, all the way to the Pacific coast in Oregon, where you go through plains, you go through mountains, you go through valleys. It's just stunningly, stunningly beautiful. I included on this trip a stop overnight in Yellowstone National Park. I got to see buffalo. I got held up by buffalo multiple times on their 2-lane roadways. And I became very, very close to a bison and her calf crossing the roadway. I saw the beauty of Oregon and the Highway 101 Pacific Coast. And then down to wine country and into Sonoma, where I saw another friend. And talking about friends, that second goal, I've met 2 friends from high school, one in Sonoma, here in Steamboat Springs. We all lived within 4 blocks of each other in a Cedar Rapids neighborhood. We all went to high school together, and seeing them has nourished my spirit. But most importantly, why I'm doing this show, why I'm talking to you, this trip was about my mission work. It was about going to places where transgender people are not necessarily visible, and doing my work around Gray Area Thinking, my workshop that provides a tool set about how to get past othering. And I'm happy to report further that in Idaho, I presented Gray Area Thinking to 2 churches, one in Idaho Falls, one in Boise. In addition to that, I did Gray Area Thinking for the Wasmuth Human Rights Center. Believe it or not, in downtown Boise, there is a human rights center that focuses on, at first, fighting white supremacy, but also about genocide, about the Holocaust, but about human rights generally. And they were kind enough to bring me in to do Gray Area Thinking in the morning, where we had about 40 participants, and then to bring me back in the evening. They wanted me to do 2 talks. In the evening, I did my talk, Gleaning Authenticity from a Moment of Truth, which is partly my story, but partly also about what it means to live authentically. And I've got to tell you, at all of the places where I did my talks in Idaho, my work was incredibly well received. People seemed to be really, really open-minded to what I spoke about. But the meeting that meant the most to me was after doing gray area thinking upstairs in a church in Idaho Falls. I went downstairs to, it's either a weekly or monthly support group called the Gay Agenda. There were about a dozen people in the kitchen function room in the basement of the church. Many transgender people, but some people who just identified as gay or lesbian. And I spoke with them for about 45 minutes. They were having a business meeting. And during the course of that meeting, I learned about a group that they had formed called Trans Affirm Inc. They'd gone so far as to incorporate Trans Affirm to get a 501c3 filing for it. And they've raised money to pay for hormone replacement therapy for 6 different transgender people who can't afford it. They've been doing work around going to Pride events. Believe it or not, in Idaho, so far they've attended 6 Pride events. I was shocked to hear that there were that many Pride events, and Boise still hasn't had its Pride event. That will be later on in September. But this group of determined transgender people and allies that I met in Idaho Falls really, really touched me, because it was clear about how difficult it is to live in Idaho. And yet they have remained fighting the oppression. They have remained going around the state, literally going around the state to different prides, handing out their cards, letting transgender people know that they are there to provide them with support. They have also undertaken what I found is incredible, a survey of businesses across Idaho to create what I call a transgender green book. You may recall that the original green book came out of Jim Crow and was available to African Americans who traveled through the South. And that green book identified hotels and restaurants and restrooms where they could go to avoid the ravages of Jim Crow, places that would be welcoming to them and that would not discriminate against them. Well, this group, Trans Affirm Inc., and their allies are creating what I'm calling, as I said, a transgender green book of businesses in Idaho that will allow transgender people to use their restrooms without reporting them, without making their lives difficult, because you will recall from my prior reporting on this show that Idaho has passed a horrific bill, a horrific law that makes it illegal to use any restroom anywhere in the state that aligns with your gender identity. And that law, as you'll hear in the upcoming segment when I talk to my guest, Emily, that law provides a 1-year jail sentence if you're caught using the restroom that aligns with your gender identity and not with the gender assigned at birth. And so this group, Trans Affirm Inc., is working to create this book so that transgender people have a place to go use the restroom without fear of being arrested or prosecuted. Now, listeners, can you imagine this as you're listening to me right now? Can you imagine? I mean, even my cisgender listeners, can you imagine having to be afraid of being arrested for peeing? I mean, it's incredible. It is ridiculous. It is beyond the pale of what a normal society should do for any people. And yet that is the situation in Idaho. I'm also thrilled to report that the Wasmuth Center, the Human Rights Center in Boise, is talking about and raised the subject of bringing me back to Boise to do more work around gray area thinking, to do more work around supporting transgender people. And so I am like, yeah, bring me back. I'm happy to go back to Boise. If you want to find out more about my trip to Boise, you may recall that Evan Urquhart from Assigned Media has been on the show a couple of times. He's probably going to become a regular contributor. Well, Evan interviewed me about my time in Boise, and he posted that interview. He recorded it, and that interview is on the website of Assigned Media. All you have to do is Google Assigned Media. Go to the website. They've got a landing page where you'll be able to find that my interview with Evan and get a better idea about my experience in Idaho. I've just got to tell you, this trip in many ways has been life-changing for me. I've learned some things about myself on this trip that I needed to understand before I'm no longer on this earth. And it has motivated me to do some things differently in my life as I go forward. I mean, I cannot imagine not having taken this trip. And so I'm incredibly thankful and grateful that I did. The last thing I will tell you is that I felt incredible guilt being in Idaho, because as I talked to that Trans Affirm group, the people in the basement of the church, I felt incredibly guilty that I live in Minnesota, where I don't have to worry about laws, about anything that are discriminating against me because who I am. Oh, boy. But the brave people in Idaho, they're fighting back. They're resisting. They're not giving in. My hat is off to them. I have the greatest admiration for them staying and for not leaving. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to do my interview with Emily Jackson-Edney. You're going to see a different setting for that interview because I was trying to do it outside, but I'm inside now. You'll be listening to me. Ellie Krug will be back in a sec. And we're back. Ellie Krug with the Illegal Trans Woman, talking to you from a wonderful porch in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And it's now time for the big interview. And I am thrilled to have Emily Jackson-Edney here, someone who I met in Boise when I spoke there, as I related in the previous segment. Emily, welcome to the Illegal Trans Woman. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you, Ellie. I'm just pleased to be here also.
So I'll recount a little bit for the audience. I spoke, as I said earlier in the segment, in the show at the Wasmuth Center for Human Rights. I gave 2 talks, one in the morning, My Gray Area Thinking, and one in the evening, a talk titled Gleaning Authenticity from a Moment of Truth. And you happened to be in the audience at both of those talks. And I had heard also from folks associated with the center that you were a leader relative to transgender rights in Idaho. And I also had heard, or at least suspected, that like me, that you were a pioneer in Idaho as it related. And so I wanted to have you on the show to talk a little bit about your story, to talk a little bit about the landscape as it exists in Idaho, and to talk about the grit and the courage of your fellow Idahoan transgender folks and gay and lesbian, bisexual people. So welcome to the show. You and I have a little bit of a similar story in the sense that both of us transitioned in our 50s, but you transitioned a little bit later than me, a little earlier in time. So it was, 2006 when you started to transition? Do I have that right?
Well, actually, I started my transition in earnest, actually, in 2003.
Okay.
Began living full-time in 2005 and retired from my job in 2006. So.
Okay, so give us a little bit of the story. I mean, like me, you had been married, you had children, and then you were also a military veteran with service in, I believe, in Vietnam, and then you worked for was it the State Highway Department?
It was a local highway agency here in the county that I live in. Kind of a unique organization, because it's the only one like it in the country. But yes, that's correct. I worked for them and pretty much my entire life, and for a little over 36 years, and retired from that job when I was 57.
Okay. All right. So, when did you first have an idea about being, trans? Of course, as we were growing up, that word hadn't actually been really invented. When did you have an idea that your brain didn't match your body? And then I want to take us forward to you coming out and you literally being a pioneer in Idaho.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think my earliest recollection actually was when I was a toddler, and of course I didn't understand what that was, and but it didn't start to manifest itself until I was entering elementary school, and that's when you learn very quickly that to act outside the gender norm was to invite ridicule and violence, and so very quickly you learn to put that away because you're dealing with bullies and those type of things. So so anytime I expressed um, who I was, it was always in private, and it ended up just being more of a cross-dressing type of a thing, um, and for the rest of my life, it was one of my deepest, darkest secrets that
Yep.
I withheld from everyone, including my wife. And so in 2003, I came out to my wife simply as a cross dresser, and I didn't really go into any more detail than that, and she seemed to be somewhat accepting of that as long as she didn't see it. But
Mm.
then when she did see it, then I think that's when things really started to be problematic in our marriage, and um, and then all of the old memories from my youth and things started to come back. That it really went way beyond, just the simple cross dressing to touch my soft feminine side, and it was uh, much more on the trans side, identifying as a woman, and what do I do to live authentically and with dignity and honor, and it was scary, and in fact, I was suicidal, and that's what really scared me into searching out psychotherapeutic help and trying to find resources and things like that. And of course, in 2003, computer, that was just AOL dial up. There wasn't really much for resources to try to figure out, this phenomenon that I was entering.
Well, and so, but you made some hard decisions, and obviously there was some loss in your life. I mean, your marriage ended.
Correct.
If I understand from your biography, you had one of your children had great difficulty with you transitioning, but you came out at a time in Idaho when transgender people were not very visible. And you related to me that at your workplace, that you had been accepted, that people were willing to, that the workplace was willing to accommodate you, and that you were accepted. And how, I mean, did you find that for a while in Idaho in general? That, I mean, notwithstanding some of the personal pain and rejection that you received from family and maybe friends, but did you notice that, you know, Idahoans in general were accepting? And then my corollary question will be, did something change over time relative to acceptance of transgender people that you found? Because you are and you were a pioneer.
Um, it was really untested ground when I started my transition, um, and things were changing in my life for a couple years. Pretty much starting around 2003. I started growing my hair longer. My lifelong beard, I had shaved that off. I was going through some electrolysis to get rid of my facial hair. Um, I ended up getting my ears pierced, which really kind of freaked out my workplace, and so people know that I worked in a very testosterone heavy environment, and as a supervisor of a division that did contract administration, and had a staff of about 30, and so I was an A personality, which was really difficult for me, but that's
Sure.
how it had to work. Um, so um, so just trying to find the resources and the courage to face my what I call my demons. Um, it was very, very difficult, and just finding professional help, the competent, culturally competent help, was not only psychotherapeutic but also in the medical field, was very difficult too. Um, I when I finally decided that this is a course of action I need to take. I knew that through some research that I did, that I did not have any protections for
In
me in
Idaho,
the
you
place.
mean legal protections in Idaho? Yes. Go on.
Um, and that's no protections in employment and housing and public accommodation and in education. Not part of gender identity, sexual orientation. We're not part of the Idaho Human Rights Act, and so I knew that just coming out to my employer, there was a possibility that I could be sent down the road, and knowing that that was a possibility was the chance that I needed to take, in order to live authentically. And if I would have been sent down the road, understand that I had position and power and longevity, and that I probably would have sued my employer at that time if that would have happened. Um, but I decided I need, the first step and I followed the W path very, very strictly. Um, and
WPATH being the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, standards around transitioning.
yeah,
And Emily, I'm going to interrupt you because I'd like to sort of move the story along, because you, if I have read your biography correctly, I mean, you were instrumental in helping to get some non-discrimination laws put in place in Idaho.
correct.
And you became, if I understand correctly, you became sort of a leading figure for the transgender community in Idaho. What was that like for you?
Well, it was something new. Understand that I was a white cisgender male, and I'd never thought about what it would be like to transition, and I was just living my life um, and then hiding my deep secrets.
Right.
Uh, so um, so coming out was um, something new to me, and it was never in my plan. I did have a mentor that helped me a little bit along at the get go, and one day she said, "Emmy, I'm going to make you an activist," and I go, "What the heck," And because it was never in my wildest dreams to even approach activism, and so I refer to myself early on as the reluctant activist, and but the interesting thing is you start getting involved in the community, and you start showing up, and you start being visible, and pretty soon you're asked to be on a committee, or um, be on a board, um, and so it really kind of starts to take off that way, and then organizations start to recognize you and uh, rely on you to be and the information, and so it's and then it just kind of progresses and keeps progressing, and um, but one of the things I was working on early on in my transition um, here in Idaho was two things. One is to work with the Idaho legislature to add sexual orientation, gender identity as protected classes in the Idaho Human Rights Act, and then also to lobby municipalities around the state to add sexual orientation, gender identity, not only in their employment policies, but in their non-discrimination policies that cover their corporate city limits. And so over the few years, we were able to do that. A coalition of partners that I was involved in, and we got 13 cities to enact a non-discrimination ordinance to protect public accommodation, employment, and housing, and then one county, the county that I live in.
And that included the city of Boise, correct?
Correct. The city of Boise was actually the second, and the city of Sandpoint, which really unfortunately early this year backtracked on their ordinance, and
they rescinded it. Yeah,
very, very sad. So there's currently, and I think the Ada County did too. That's the county I live in. So there are 12 cities still have non-discrimination ordinances, and Boise's one of them. Our neighboring city of Meridian is another one, and then spread out all over the state. There's the other 10 or so.
But if I understand correctly, your legislature has passed a number of laws targeting the transgender community, including laws around access to locker rooms and bathrooms for students, as well as access to restrooms within the whole entire state. And if I understand correctly, the state law is going to take precedence as it relates to transgender people over the local ordinances. And so we've got about 6.5 minutes left. I'd like to, you've allowed me to at least relate that you are a plaintiff in a lawsuit currently in Idaho, relating to the bathroom law, the anti-transgender bathroom law that was enacted and signed by the governor earlier this year. And we don't need to get into the details of that lawsuit. But what I want to do is ask for you, to the extent that you feel comfortable, what is it like now living in Idaho when you know that you have a state government that is going, it's to me from the outside, seemingly going out of its way to target transgender people? What does it feel like?
Well, it's very troubling, and it's very scary living in this state, because to know that there is a target on your back just simply because of who you are, and it follows pretty much what's happening on a national level too. Trans people, and especially our trans youth, are the low-hanging fruit, and we're very easy pickings in a very small minority, marginalized minority. And I have numerous friends that have moved out of this state to neighboring states because of they fear for their lives, they fear for their safety, and they fear for their livelihoods, for not only them but their families. And but
you've chosen to stay, and you've chosen to fight. Why?
I have. Idaho is my home, and I love Idaho. Boise is a progressive enclave in the state, and I'm comfortable living here in Boise. They welcome me, and they welcome my community, and they are continually being bombarded by the legislature trying to get them to not be so progressive. But so this is my home state. This is my hometown. I love the people here in Idaho. The people here in Idaho are good. There's a vocal minority that create problems, certainly. And so when I travel around, I'm very careful of where I go, and there are certain places I won't go. I typically won't go into a cowboy bar or some other places. But so I'm very diligent about that. But I do put myself out there, and I think you have to be visible. You have to show yourself as living honestly and genuinely and with dignity and honor in your trans identity. And I think that's extremely important because not very many people know somebody like me, and so you have to get over that. Uh, um, that's just very, very difficult. So as far as the people that I know, they are very worried. They're scared. The most current bathroom law, if people understand that, it's got a criminal component to it, which could throw a trans person in jail or in prison
for possibly 1 year, just for one offense, and
that's a misdemeanor.
And 5 years for a second offense. It's
correct. And then if it goes to the fourth time, then you're a repeat offender, and then it's a mandatory minimum of 5 years up to life in prison. And so it's very egregious, Jim Crow 2.0 draconian law. And that's the reason why I'm a plaintiff, because it definitely needs to change. And so people know that law has been enjoined, and it's currently in front of the Ninth Circuit Court, where our AG is attempting to get that overturned, and it's going to be a while before that happens. But
right. But I've got to tell you, I mean, when I was in Idaho, it was not lost on me about how the state legislature has been so oppressive, and so every time I went into a restroom, I thought about, if the law was not enjoined, how that would put me at risk. And I just cannot imagine living in a state where that was the situation. And so I want to, we've got just about a minute left, but I want to, Emily, it was very clear to me that when people talked to me about you when I was in Boise and pointed you out, it was very clear that they were so right. That, and I wish we had more time to speak, because your story has great richness and breadth to it. But you are in your 70s, and you are relentless, it appears. It appears to me that you are incredibly brave and incredibly courageous. And I just want to, as one woman to another woman who happens to be both transgender, I just want to applaud you. I want to just thank you for all that you've done and all that more that you're going to continue to do, because I know that litigation is not easy. And I just want you to know that I'm just thankful that you exist, and that all the hard work that you've done.
I appreciate that very much. And I applaud you, Ellie, for the work that you do and the life that you live. And we have a lot of similarities. We have commonality in our stories. And when I met you, I knew you were my sister. And that was very important to me. So I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing.
Well, Emily, please keep the work. Please keep up the hard work. Okay. Good luck to you. I know litigation is not easy. I may be coming back to Boise, and if I do, certainly let's get together. Okay.
I would really enjoy that. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Well, everyone, we've been speaking with Emily Jackson-Edney, who is a pioneer, literally a pioneer in Idaho for the transgender community, and someone I greatly admire. And so if you want to know more about what's going on in Idaho, just Google bathroom bill lawsuit, and you'll be able to find more, and you'll find Emily's name on some court papers. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to do my news bites. You're listening to me, Ellie Krug, with The Illegal Trans Woman. I will be back in a second. And we're back. Ellie Krug with the illegal trans woman. Emily Jackson-Edney. I truly wish we'd had more time to talk to her because she really is a pioneer. At least you got a sense of how she's worked hard in Idaho. And you can imagine how difficult it was in the aughts to come out in Idaho. And so, okay, news bites. I've got two of them for you. In the Atlantic this week, there's an essay by a transgender woman named Julia Curley. She was a CIA officer. She was the first to transition at the CIA and then stay at the CIA. And eventually she became so high up in the CIA that she was tasked with briefing in Trump 1, Donald Trump and Mike Pence on their daily briefing, because they get briefed every day. In theory, Donald Trump reads the stuff, but we hear that he didn't. But Mike Pence did. And she would brief them. She was out at the CIA, but apparently there was no problem with her in Trump 1 doing that. And then she went on to do security briefings for the Biden administration. I would add that Julia Curley also passes 110% because if you did not know that she'd been assigned a different gender at birth, most likely there'd be no way that you would ever guess. But when Trump 2 came along and Trump started stripping transgender people of their rights, there was a question of how long that she would remain at the White House. I think that she stayed about 75 days until Laura Loomer got word that there was a transgender security professional in the White House. Just go check out the Atlantic. You don't need I don't think you need a subscription to read Julia Curley, Curlee story. She was incredibly courageous, and she made the point that othering, that forcing people out of government because of who they are has made the United States both weaker and more vulnerable. She is incredibly eloquent. There was a MSNBC interview of her. Also go check that out. All right, that was News Bite number 1. News Bite number 2. Recall how several shows ago I talked about transgender refugees. I've talked about transgender refugees a number of times, okay? But I've talked about several shows ago about how in Seattle, trans refugees are showing up from other states, from like Texas and Florida, where they don't have rights, where the state is oppressing transgender people, and they're showing up in Seattle. But the Seattle nonprofits were overwhelmed because they didn't have the resources to provide for the trans refugees. Well, according to the Seattle Times, in a story this week, the Seattle City Council has allocated $300,000 to local LGBTQ plus organizations to help with transgender refugees. This money will help pay for housing, food, and employment resources for trans folks. So that's great. I mean, it's $300,000. It's not a whole lot of money, but it's a start. And at least it's the city council reacting to the crisis that they're having in their state. I've got to imagine that this is being replicated, that trans refugees are in other places. We know that they're showing up in Denver. They're certainly showing up in Minneapolis and the Twin Cities. And this is only going to get worse as the oppression by the government ramps up, and particularly if the November elections go the wrong way. Okay, well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to talk to you about my Random Acts. I've got a number of things. You're listening to me, Ellie Krug, on The Illegal Trans Woman. If you like what you hear, visit my website at elliekrug.com. I'm incredibly grateful that this show goes out across the world. Please tell other people about it. Please send a link of this show to others. I know that since I've been in Idaho and in Sonoma, California, where I also spoke, we've got people listening to this show now, more people, so that's great. All right, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back in a second. And we're back. Ellie Krug with the Illegal Trans Woman. I'm thrilled now. It's time to talk about random acts. Let's see if I can squeeze 3 of them in. Last month, at the end of July, I spoke about 16-year-old May Pollard, a transgender teen who was living in Boise, who had all the love of both of her parents, all the support that she could have, but who ended up taking her life because of the state oppression, the kind of stuff that we just heard from Emily Jackson-Edney. Well, when I was in Boise speaking at the Wasmu Center, I gave a talk in that evening titled Gleaning Authenticity from a Moment of Truth. We had about 60 people in the audience. What I did not know was that May Pollard's mother was in that audience. Unfortunately, she didn't have the time to come up and introduce herself after the talk, but she sent me an incredibly touching email afterward, telling me that she appreciated me being in Boise. She appreciated me talking about May on this show. And that shows you how the work of this show and my work can have meaning for people in a profound and deep way. And I'm grateful that she came to my talk. I'm grateful that she emailed me afterwards. Second, random act, as I have mentioned already, it looks like there's a strong possibility that I will go back to Boise. And if so, I'm hoping that my imprint can be bigger than, I talked to a total of close to, 100 people when I was maybe 120 people when I was in Boise. I would like to be able to go back and speak to 500 or 1,000 people. We shall see what happens. Third random act. On this road trip, I stopped on my way. I was in North Dakota. I'd never been in North Dakota before, other than in Fargo. I was out in western North Dakota, in Medora, North Dakota, where the Teddy Roosevelt Presidential Museum is. And I stopped there. It is an incredibly cool-looking building, built into the earth with an earthen roof where you can go up and walk on the roof. It was crowded the day that I went. It was very informative in a variety of ways. But what surprised me the most, Teddy Roosevelt lived an incredible life. He also lived a life of incredible pain and loss. His mother and his wife, who both lived in the same house in New York City, died on the same day within an hour of each other. Now, can you imagine that? And to boot, Teddy Roosevelt at that time had an infant daughter. He ended up going out to North Dakota to deal with that loss. But what surprised me the most about the whole museum was that with Trump whitewashing all of, American history, there still was a small exhibit about Roosevelt's decision to ignore the needs of Black Americans. He had at first reached out to the Black community, had the distinction of inviting the very first Black American to dinner at the White House. That was Booker T. Washington. But there was an incredible pushback against Roosevelt after that. And then he ended up ignoring the Black community for the rest of his terms while he was in the White House. I was surprised that they had that part of the exhibit. So what do you know? Maybe they just missed it. Okay, I got to go. A big thanks to my producer, Patrick. Thank you, Patrick, for doing this remotely and doing some hoop jumping for me. Listeners, I've been rushed in a variety of ways on this show. Sorry about that. But we needed to get this show in because you needed to hear about the work that I'm doing, about the experiences that I've had. I'll be back in the office, back at the station next week doing a regular show. And in the meantime, between now and then, go out and do something good for someone else as well as for yourself. Ellie Krug, Illegal Trans Woman, over and out.